Hello, you're watching the TelecomTV Summit on Edgenomics and our panel discussion on the role of 5G in private network innovation. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content for TelecomTV. Private wireless networks have become one of the hottest areas of development, but major questions remain, including the role of public network operators and the value of the additional benefits that 5G can bring. With the help of today's guests, we're going to address some of the key issues that arise from TelecomTV's ongoing editorial coverage of edge and private networks. So joining us on the programme today are Marc Overton, who is Managing Director of DivisionX at BT Enterprise, Miguel Carames, Executive Director of Cloud and Technology Planning at Verizon, Aranda Partouche, Global Vertical Principal Director at Colt Technology Services, and José Antonio Aranda, who is Global Innovation Director at Cellnex. Hello everyone, very good to see you all. Thanks so much for taking part in our discussion today. First question I have for you is, what's actually driving the market for private 5G networks? Is it telco and vendor push to create a market for their 5G investments, or is it a pull from enterprises based on their actual needs? Aranda, let me start with you and find out your views on this.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Guy. From my point of view and from our point of view, what we see from the market, it's not a push from the telco, it's not a push from the vendor. Of course, there is a push, and it's normal when we are bringing new technology, but it's really an interest coming from the enterprise. So there is this digital transformation on the enterprise side, and of course, it's not exactly the same challenge we have on the different verticals. And they see 5G and potentially private 5G, the fact that we can have a bespoke network for them as a way for them to accelerate this digital transformation. Secondly, we have also this virtualization, the flexibility that we have today to deploy networks. So it's much simpler today to deploy a 5G network because it's cloud native, because we have so many options. So it brings more opportunities now, and this is what is what at the end raise some interest for the enterprise. So it's interest. I would not say that at this stage it's need, because they want to see what they can do with private 5G, rather than, okay, it's clear what I'm doing and still validating the ROI, but there's a real interest coming from the enterprise.
Thanks very much, Aranda. That's very interesting what you said there about not necessarily on what you're seeing is not necessarily on actual needs today, but more of an interest from the enterprise. Marc, can I bring you into the discussion at this point? Are you seeing a similar thing, or what's your view here?
Yeah, as Aranda said, I think a lot of it's about digital transformation. I think the importance of resilient, low latency, high bandwidth communications that are secure is just front of mind at the moment, especially given COVID and the challenges of doing business remotely. I think linked to that, what we have with 5G is an ecosystem where you've got unified communications, seamless unified communications, and the ability to go across not just high bandwidth, but narrowband applications, and indeed things like satellite as well. So there's a real coming together of a whole load of connectivity solutions, fundamentally, which enable the enterprise to really design their use cases, what's relevant for their business outcomes. And with BT here, I've only been in the company for 4 weeks, but it's amazing what BT's done in the 5G space in terms of its network. It's well ahead of the other operators, and we're starting to see those use cases. So that the enterprise demand for running their specific business requirements over these hyperscale integrated and unified networks.
Great, thanks, Marc. And as you say, you've only been in BT for a short time, and you're heading up a very interesting department. Can you just quickly explain to us what DivisionX is all about?
No, it's a great question, and it's not to do with a Marvel comic. It is an opportunity for for BT to have a different conversation with its customers around a digital transformation that I've just mentioned. We're looking very much at combining 5G, IoT, edge and cloud solutions together to provide unique services that sit above the connectivity layer of private networks in particular, to help businesses do their digital transformation and specifically venturing into adjacent verticals like transport and logistics and health, where these industries are using digital technologies to transform, and BT is well positioned to help them.
Great, thanks very much, Marc. Well, I don't know, but I think we're all superheroes in telecoms, aren't we? Let's move on to our next question. And Miguel, perhaps I could start by asking you this, because there's several technologies already in play within private networking. What gives 5G an advantage, if any?
It's a great question, Guy, and I think actually Aaron and Marc already touched upon some of the advantages. So increased security is a big one. The standards have evolved towards cloud native. Very, very relevant for enterprises when you're thinking about pairing the private network itself with a private MEC offering and being able to move some of the workloads the enterprises have and take advantage of this compute now in a very flexible and powerful way. And then even the access to different types of spectrum that come with 5G, right? So if you look at some of the dynamics here in the US, we're actually putting millimeter wave spectrum that's designed for 5G to use for some of the enterprise solutions, like some of the ones that have gone to market, like we announced a couple of weeks ago, they installed with BlackRock real-time trading, right? A big installation in their new facilities in New York City. And their performance requirements are very stringent. And millimeter wave is a big component of that solution that we're going to be providing for them as far as density of devices, throughput, and latency requirements. So that's what's driving the 5G component of private networks. Now, there are going to be other deployments of the verticals where the solution is likely going to be mixed, right? Because you have a set of existing devices, maybe lower cost devices. And Marc was talking about IoT. So the price point for the modules is still very different between 4G and 5G. So in some enterprises, we are deploying dual mode cores so we can serve both those devices. And then the 5G use cases that have more stringent requirements from a security and performance perspective. But it's very much the requirements from the customers that are driving the adoption for 5G.
Great, thanks, Miguel. And yeah, that was a fascinating case study that was announced a few weeks ago about BlackRock over there in New York. We'll keep an eye on that one. Okay, well, why don't we move on and look at our next question? And we want to talk about the actual innovation we're seeing here. Jose, perhaps I could direct this one to you first. What innovation are you seeing for dedicated private 5G solutions as opposed to repurposing wider 5G standards work? And what role does edge compute assets play here?
Yes, as it was mentioned, when we think of private networks, we think of a geo-redundant network architecture, where you try to integrate with the customer infrastructure. Security is one of the aspects as well, because the data stays on site, but also it gives the flexibility to the customer to have control and dashboards to see what is the network performance. But when it comes to 5G, we see that there is a potential opportunity to innovate around the level of autonomy, because with 5G compared with Wi-Fi or even public 4G or even 5G, is higher. Also, as I mentioned, there is a lot of opportunities on innovating around data privacy. Compared with Wi-Fi and public networks, also seamless mobility is an area also where we see a lot of innovation, as well as reliability, because the 5G network is more reliable. And potentially coverage as well, because sometimes with Wi-Fi you are centric in indoor, while in 5G private network connectivity, you can customize that and do it more generic or both a mixture of indoor and outdoor. Traditionally, with the private networks on 4G, we have dedicated our efforts in basically providing together with the mobile operators, group communications, things like push to talk that were traditionally provided in the networks, or instant messages, things like voice over IP calls or video streaming, and some a little bit of digital processing. But when it comes to the private networks and the 5G, the edge, it will be something very differential, because you will have the possibility of offering not only the connectivity, but processing capacity in the industry, and also a storage capacity, content capacity. And that opens up a very interesting wide range of services, solutions like guaranteed continuous operations, things like asset management more efficiently, and also to locate within the factory or the industry all the different assets. Improvement of security and safety, and you have different areas there to innovate. We also see digitalization, automation, remote control, and also low latency, real-time services, and that as enablers, together with assets that you can put in an industry or in a private networks, like security cameras, like critical communications, like augmented reality, or like hybrid communications, or even massive industrial IoT, will be something that the edge compute will enable together with the private networks.
Great, thanks very much, Jose. And as you say, it's not just connectivity we're talking about here. Marc, what about you? What innovation are you seeing for dedicated private 5G solutions? And and is there scope for more innovation that perhaps we in telecoms wouldn't normally consider or think of?
Yeah, no, it's a really important enabler to IoT. I think that's, for me, where 5G gets really interesting. It's the use cases that sit over a highly resilient, secure, unified communications infrastructure, and we're only starting to scratch the surface on what innovations available. As was previously said, quality of service and that control, I think, gives the enterprises confidence that they can actually use these types of connected solutions to really transform their business. If you think about a smart space, and we've often talked about smart cities, smart spaces, this is really starting to bring that promise to life, that complete unified space where everything's connected. It's low latency, it's high bandwidth, the quality of service is dependable. I think we're really starting to see the acceleration of IoT that we've all been talking about, but not really bringing to life. And I think this provides, for me, 5G private networks and IoT are going to really work hand in glove and accelerate a lot of the excitement around the changes to business processes and business offers. And I think it's not just about the factory. It's not just about the access to standard IT and IS services. There's many other things related to this infrastructure which we just don't even know about today. So I think it's going to create huge amounts of innovation way beyond the connectivity level.
Yeah, thanks, Marc. With applications and innovation that as you say, we're not even aware of yet. We'll just see how it all develops. But certainly the potential is certainly there. Well, unless we've got any more views on what we're seeing innovation-wise, we'll move on. And there's a question I'd like to ask. And Aaron, if I could put this one to you first. And this is, it's all about what constitutes private 5G. How customizable and scalable is private 5G? And we talk about enterprises a lot, but what's the entry point look like for smaller companies?
By default, private 5G is customizable. It's a bespoke private network, so by default, it should be customizable. What is interesting is I think we will have different flavors of private 5G. And as you said, we could have this kind of entry point type of networks where potentially it will be a small cells and everything in the cloud, easy to be deployed, or it could be much more complex with different elements, with ORAN elements, with 5G virtual network. So we will have, for mission critical type of application, for instance. So we will have different flavors of private 5G networks. It makes things sometimes a bit complex because there are so many actors now in the market that we need to understand who is doing what and who will answer to what type of needs. Yes, and at the end, what we are currently piloting with one of our real estate customers is how we could, for instance, use private 5G network to converge most of the, let's say, network capabilities inside the buildings. It's, of course, we have to go beyond the fact that we don't have yet all the ecosystem ready in 5G, but at least are we able to converge everything in this type of networks? And when we are looking at this type of let's say exercise, and we are looking at a simple network. We are not looking at something that is very complex. We are not in a big port where we have a wide ecosystem and where the need will be a bit different. So again, different flavors. It could be very simple, or it could be much more complex, and at the end, an ecosystem that is also very rich in terms of who can deliver this kind of private 5G networks because of this variety of, let's say, of needs.
Thank you, Aaron. Miguel, not all enterprises are the same. They've all got different needs. They're all different sizes. So I guess, as Aaron was saying, it's an ecosystem here. It's scalable. We're not prohibiting private 5G for the smaller companies, are we?
Right. Yeah. And I actually love Aaron's answer. Like, I think we risk oversimplifying the message a little bit with some of the claims of, like a solution in a box that I'll send your way and you'll install it as if it was a Wi-Fi access point for a coffee shop. That is one extreme, and there is a market for that. And maybe there is a market even to get the industry started, right? Get the companies that are at this point like borderline, like the potential, but are not ready to make big investments yet. That's a way to get them started. In the US, we have access to unlicensed spectrum like CBRS. That's a big enabler for this. But then when you think at kind of the opposite extreme, we talk about black rocks, but some of the other use cases that are current, like the mining, construction sites, even health, right? Connected hospitals and so on, the requirements are dramatically different. You are talking about multi-story buildings, multi-acre type deployments. And that does require the expertise to build, run, and optimize the network too. It's not something that the IT team in the industry is necessarily ready for, and maybe they shouldn't be, right? Because they are in the business of running their applications and enabling the business. They are not necessarily in the business of running a wireless network, 4G or 5G, right? So I think we have this entire spectrum. And then to add to this, many of these enterprises, they want a continuum as a service. So they don't want things to only work on-prem with the private network is deployed, but they want some of the services and applications to also apply when certain devices, at least some limited user types within their enterprise, to have access to the applications also when they are outside the enterprise, right? So if you think about a delivery use case, for example, you do your asset tracking and you do your smart video collection within the distribution center. But then once you load the truck, then you want to make sure that you can track those through delivery in an automated fashion. Now that's interfacing with the macro network. And you might have some of the applications and workloads that work both on the what we call private MEC attached to the private network, but also in public MEC attached to the public network, right? So I think you have really like the verticals are so diverse and the requirements are so different, both from a customer perspective, but from a regulatory perspective even, that really we risk, I think, at times oversimplifying things. And there is space for everything, right? Like simple, unlicensed spectrum, customer can self-install, and then the other extreme where you really need professional services and optimized implementation so you can meet the expectations of for your use cases, basically.
Thanks, Miguel. Yeah, absolutely fascinating, the scope here. And as you say, there is a risk that we might be oversimplifying the message at times. Marc, let me come across to you for your views on this.
Yeah, well, similar to as Miguel was saying, I think there's a real opportunity across that spectrum to play to the strengths of a mobile operator such as BT or Verizon. That's what we do. That's our core competence, and the fact that we're taking part of that, and if you like, atomizing it down to a local level, you're still running a network. And the challenges of running a network, you're building a network is one thing, running it day to day, but actually the real opportunity is about how you optimize that and how you integrate it into the use cases, those IoT applications that sit off it. And that's a big systems integration job. And you're going to have to, have an ecosystem of partners to work with. So I think, in that sense, I think network operator can definitely help navigate that ecosystem, provide solutions to that ecosystem, potentially coordinate and corral that ecosystem on behalf of the enterprise. That's what we're really focusing on in DivX and BT, is really building that ecosystem so enterprises aren't completely confused by what all this means. At Mobile World Congress the other day, everyone's talking about private networks as if it is something that is literally a box that you can plug in. And that may be relevant in some use cases, but the complexity of the integration, both into the IoT use cases and into the corporate systems, should not be underestimated. And then running that network is something that people who run networks for a living understand probably better than most. So it seems logical to have a central place in this ecosystem for the operator to help navigate for the enterprise how to really do this and get the most out of it.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Marc. And this leads very nicely into our next question. Jose, how does a dedicated slice from a telco compare with an off-the-shelf 5G product brought by an enterprise from an IT vendor?
So I will say two main aspects. One is personalization, and second is the possibility of having a basic infrastructure that enables to integrate other technologies. So, and on this, we have been discussing with our customers and the mobile operators at length the concept of slicing, and because there has been a very interesting discussion about slicing compared with private network, but I would like to integrate both concepts into one. How about private networks that within the same private networks you can put different slices, and that's the beauty of that technology. So imagine that in a private network you are able to provide specific slices for basic communications between the different users across the private network. You can use different slicing for massive IoT, things like sensing or even machine-to-machine communications. But at the same time, if you may have critical processes that may require more ultra-low latency technologies, or things like AGVs, automatic guided vehicles that may run in the private network, or everything that has to be with robotics, or everything that has to be with the automation of the factory. That's also something that you could do with a specific slide under the specific private network. But also you might have needs of certain slicing to guarantee more bandwidth with cameras, for instance, or to provide services like augmented reality or quality checks of a production. So I see that the combination of the private network with the slicing enables you several use cases, not only in factory, in general. It enables connected workers in terms of making sure that the operational safety of that worker, if you have a specific slide dedicated to that, you can guarantee that. If it comes to bigger venue like logistics related to ports or airports, you see everything that has to be with smart assets and fleet control. You can have a specific slices to that, but as well as a location of the different assets. And the last thing that I think is very relevant as well is the possibility of enabling seamless mobility across an entire campus. That could be an industry or could be an area that can be also facilitated with the slicing. So I think that slicing combined with private networks is a key aspect that we need to leverage when we propose solutions to the customers.
Yeah, thank you, Jose, for that. And Miguel, let's come across to you for your comments here, because it's an interesting part of the discussion.
Yeah, and I love Jose's answer, right? Like, I think we are very much aligned. So we don't see slicing as a kind of like a strong or hard alternative to private networks. In many ways, we see our private network solutions as one of the first slices that we are bringing to market. And then there'll be slices that will be supported in the public network, slices that will be supported within the private networks to cover all the use cases that Jose was talking about. And then there'll be slices that will apply to both domains, right? Because as I said before, some customers, they have needs for some of the services to apply in the public as well as in the private network and get as much of a consistent experience as possible. So I think it's not an either or. Slicing applies to both domains, and then the coordination of the slices in both domains is going to be critical for us to provide a seamless customer experience for, again, like the use cases that require it. The ones that don't, that only live in the enterprise, they can benefit from slices that are relevant to the enterprise domain. And that's great, right? Like now you meet those requirements. But the ones that live on both domains, now you have a way to differentiate them and ensure that you meet the quality of experience targets, both in the public network and in the private network. So yeah, very much aligned with Jose's answer.
Great, that's interesting. And I do suspect that during our live after show Q&A programs, we're going to get questions from viewers about how network slicing stacks up against private 5G networks. I think there's still a bit of confusion in the market there as to what the differences are. Great, thanks everyone. Well, we've got time for one more question. So let me put this to each of you in turn. And Aaron, let me start by asking you, because this all comes down to the actual needs and interest of specific enterprises. So realistically, can telcos play a part in these discussions and help influence their decisions?
Yes, this is a key question. This is a key question. We are talking about business applications at the end on private 5G particularly. I mean, most of our enterprise wants to know what they can do better than what the radio feature that is inside or the key feature that is inside the telco equipment that we are providing. So this is where we need to be able to talk a bit more about kind of vertical use case with the enterprise. So it could be a challenge in some scenarios, and the reason why we see more and more SIs. But exactly, I mean, maybe it's a good opportunity to make a loop with your first question, where we were talking about is it a real interest or is it a real need today? I'm not sure we have yet a need. When we will reach to this level of needs, enterprise will start to come to telcos, and we start to see that with some of the big enterprise that already knows what they can do with its private cellular. So and in this case, they go directly to telco because they want really to control the different part of their solutions. But for most of them, it's still interest, so they need to understand use case, they need to understand ROIs, and reason why we see more and more SIs in the middle to incubate this type of activity with the enterprise.
Oh yes, thanks, Aaron. Marc, perhaps really this question should be, how can telcos play a part? Because I'm sure we all agree that yes, telcos can play a part here. So how realistically can we play a part in helping enterprises influence their decisions and look towards private 5G networks?
I mean, it's all about the business outcomes. What is the enterprise trying to achieve through hyper-connected solutions in its particular vertical and the use cases that hang off that. And who do they turn to? Well, I think the telcos are well placed as network operators, but also as trusted providers of network enabled solutions. So really getting up the stack, offering more complete solutions with their ecosystem of partners, providing that trusted partner status and support as this ecosystem is created and the use cases are delivered. And most importantly, really looking at it from a sort of commercial perspective rather than just rolling out a network and expecting things to change. Actually working in depth with the enterprise community to really maximize the opportunities that we're seeing. I mean, a good example that we're working with is Belfast Harbour, which has a variety of use cases, not just a port, but it also covers office blocks, restaurants, hotels that have completely different user requirements. But underpinning all of it is the hyperconnectivity, low latency, high bandwidth, and resilient communications that are secure within that port environment. And it gives these businesses an opportunity to really innovate using that hyper-connected space.
Great, thank you, Marc. And yeah, it comes back to why 5G. The time is probably right now. Jose, what about you? How can telcos play a part in what is potentially a huge opportunity?
When we approach the enterprise market and we explain what a private network is, sometimes you find that the IT director do not know why they need a private network. So sometimes we go more from the technology angle, and we need to probably start by approaching them to hear what are their pain points. What are the things that you think you could improve or you can digitalize? And when you pay attention on their demands, you will find that they are very, very basic. The first one that we have seen already in 4G is connectivity, making sure that we connect everything. And with 5G, you will be able to connect throughout all the venue, everyone and everything. Another pain point is intelligent operations, and sometimes you see that the venue owners or the factories in general understand that they need to control the entire factory, and this is an area that it is also an opportunity for the private networks. And also, it seems that improvement in the production is something that they are always looking for, and the flexibility and the productivity and the reduce of downtime that a private network can provide to your production line with automation, with inclusion of artificial intelligence, with inclusion of robotics, are things that can be solved with private networks. But also they need to understand why you might need a private network with 4G or 5G, or you might need Wi-Fi. And the reality is that with the private networks using 5G, you will increase enormously the amount of connections of a single access point, moving from 100 that a Wi-Fi can provide to just with one small cell, you can reach 800 or 1,000 and tens of thousands if you put a macro antenna there. Also, the width of the coverage, the access points have a limited coverage, and with an antenna, you can reach up to 30 kilometers. So imagine if you have a huge factory in the US, 5G will be probably your solution. Things like mobility as well, and this comes to transport. With 5G, you enable having higher speed, so you can reach fast trains and high-speed trains. And the last one, and not least important, the OPEX. In the end, a private network from the mobile operators is 4 times more effective and require less configuration. It reduces the management and maintenance cost. And what is also very important is reduces more than 5 times the TCO.
Thank you, Jose. And finally, Miguel, it seems that there's a lot that telcos can do to help enterprises here and influence their decisions, but it's not a given, is it? We've still got to work at it.
Yeah, and I might be a little bit biased, right, considering, but obviously when you look at everything that Marc, Aranda, and Jose already said, right, like this is all about the customer, right? What are the pain points? What are their needs? What can we do to solve those, right? Many of those needs are addressed by private networks. Now, it's, we've been in the entire industry has been in this journey of like decide when to buy, when to build, and when to partner. private networks is a place where there will be a lot of partnering organically, right? That's a reality because nobody does everything well. So you already see it developing, right? Like the private networks the work that we do with the private MEC that we get from our partners, with the third-party applications that come on top of that infrastructure. It's a partnering, and then SIs, which was mentioned earlier today, right? That can help address all these different use cases and integrate the applications from the enterprise into this new infrastructure as well, and help with that process. So, I mean, there is a lot of room here for a business to be developed to help with better outcomes from the customers. When you look at some of their needs and some of the requirements, I mean, the telcos are in a good position because we already solved some of these problems for the enterprise with legacy technologies today, but also because to solve them in the future, there are assets that you need that are enablers for this. Like, for example, access to licensed spectrum, right? Like if you need a certain level of reliability, it might well be that our capacity unlicensed might not be enough. You'll want to complement it with licensed too. And then the expertise, as Marc was talking about before, right? Like this, in some cases, it's going to be complex systems and you need the domain knowledge. And this is what we do for a living. So I think the opportunity is there. There is, I think we can help customers with their own digital transformation journeys. And I think there is definitely a role for the telcos to play here.
Great. Thanks, Miguel. Looks like we're off to a good start. Well, we must leave our discussion there. Thank you all very much for taking part in our program today and sharing all your views. Now, if you're watching this on day one of our TelecomTV Summit on Edgenomics, then don't forget to send us your questions and we'll try and answer them in our live after show program later today. And please take part in our online poll, which you can find below this video player window next to the Q&A app. This is the question we are asking all week, along with 5 multiple choice answers, and we'll review the votes during the after show. Don't forget to take a look at the other panel discussions in this year's Edgenomics Summit. For now, though, thank you for watching and goodbye.